you're talking about post-polling, you're talking about practices. Are you using post-polling? Are you using post-polling techniques to teach practices as well as culture?
Yes, we are really the only way to teach practices in a very short amount of time is to post-hole those practices. I think we don't get the post-hole. So our practice games are broken into parts, and you play a role. You're a field researcher, or you're a theorist, or you might, in a really big game, you might be a postdoc, which is a field researcher plus, and somebody will be a PI, primary investigator, who is also probably the theorist, but could be something else. So essentially you're playing a role and you're post-holing in that role. You don't really have time to expand out and play multiple roles, except over multiple games, where you won't play the same role several times. Hopefully in debrief, which is incredibly important, as several people have mentioned, you'll be able to catch that limitation of the game, and everyone will talk through their own experiences and create a kind of a better understanding that way. But I don't think we've got, because we don't have the number of iterations, basically every day of class you're iterating on this island of expertise, communicate about it, build scaffolding that creates an archipelago of understanding in the culture games. Because you don't have that iteration quite as often in the research games, you've got to, we're probably going to end up with more of a post-holy kind of approach. Does that make sense?
We had a question up in the front.
So also a question for David. Good to see you again since
Yeah,
in the list of aims for the curriculum, one of them in particular, resistant to cheating. Now the curiosity then becomes, if you're creating a collaborative space and a social space like that, what the heck does resistant to cheating mean?
It's really resistant to cheating. So people have to do their own work because their own work is defined by the group and responsible to the group's outcome. I mean, the group's outcomes are require you to do good work on your own, but that's not predefined. So there's no way to look out in the world and see what, pick up a paper from somebody else that did your assignment, because your assignments are created on the fly essentially based on what you need and what you're interested in. Assuming you have something like Turn It In, which will check everything in the world to determine if what you've written is actually already been written by somebody else. We have what's called Turn It In, which means that you can't literally take somebody else's text and simply use it. That would be a form of cheating that would be hard to check against unless you have something like that. Otherwise, because the assignments are freeform, you could do that, but you'll get caught. What you can't do is easily have kind of a database of papers that you're cribbing off of that are based on other people's papers, because every assignment is new. And even if you're doing that, you're doing so much work into it, putting so much work into it that it's essentially yours at that point anyway. That becomes really resistant to cheating. Right? Cheating you learn anyway.
I have a question for Evan. I was a bit confused by the end of your presentation when you sort of, I guess, implied that you would be playing the games in class, in like your upcoming class. But isn't the point of the whole assignment that the students are making the games themselves and that's how they're learning?
Both and. So in my game studies class, they made the games for the German studies class. So there's actually a cross-class collaboration happening where the German literature students will be playing the games that my other students have created. And of course, I'm creating my own games, and then of course, it's an advertisement for the other course because we're on performance-based budgeting. I need to advertise all of our departmental courses and get more enrollments. So I'm pushing my game studies course by saying, if you want to design more of these, or if you disagree with this game and how it's arguing about this novel, consider making another game.
That's a good project-based learning there, because you got real-world application.
Well, yes, and I'm desperate to know what they think about it. But yes, so it's basically, I didn't mention that, but it's the game studies students who know German who are then creating games for the German literature course.
Okay.
So this is a general question to all four of you. You're in the academic titles and excellence, of course. Do any of you have any interest in, let's say there were people out there who might not have the academic credentials, but maybe like shitloads of experience with designing this sort of stuff. Are these interesting for you as partners? This is just an open question. I'm just thinking out loud here.
Just hypothetically.
Some people in the room.
Yes, Klaus, yes. For me.
It's absolutely interesting. I think the only thing that I personally would run into is bureaucratic hurdles, specifically centered around time and money, which are tight for me specifically in my university in general. But absolutely, I would probably ascend into the next plane of existence with having this, if it could happen.
We live in room 909.
At least for us, we, right now, like, we would love, collaboration, we have no money. When we have money, yeah.
Money can be found.
Let me get him.
Sorry. We have a question back here, and then we'll come to you.
I have a question for Josh. In your working with your students, and specifically the student readers, did they demonstrate any additional understanding of the characters that they were reading? Did they tend to answer questions about those characters' motivations and thinking, or was it really more distributed throughout the class?
Yes, even the people who did not have one of the main three roles, like when I say that they scored better, what I mean is if I asked a student who wasn't one of those three, what do you think Abigail should have done in Acts 2 instead of this? They did noticeably better as a class, like maybe 10% better at asking those things that I could give my test to any English teacher in the building, and they would say, "Oh, this kid nailed this." So does that answer your question?
Sort of, I mean, so there's a theory of change. There's a theory of change, but a theory of change called the jigsaw curriculum, from the 70s. And I'm wondering how well this sort of ties together in terms of similar to the post-polling technique, sort of building an area of expertise. And I'm wondering whether the readers are essentially building an area of expertise within that character and motivations and events around that character that is then interpreted by the rest of the class and communicated to the rest of the class, or is it more that just the physical embodiment sort of like
Okay, I hear what you're saying. Because the year-long class is a survey, one of the things I noticed is that I will have, these are my drama unit rock stars, and they will do unusually well in this period of time, and they will help everybody around them. So I definitely noticed that. Now, were my drama unit rock stars even more helpful this year than they were last year because of this? Like, for example, someone who read Elizabeth Proctor every day, like, it's hard to measure their individual influence on the students around them, but I think so. And I know over the course of the year I see that, and to what extent like role-playing techniques help them be even more helpful by giving them, I know everything there is about being a Puritan wife who's accused of witchcraft because I read that every day. Like, I think that is also true.
Okay, so our last question.
I wanted to ask Jason, you mentioned some of the techniques that you used in working with the students about this compression section. Sounded a little unusual, like very expressive, dark room and scary sounds, which you communicated to the students very well. Was it kind of a hard sell to the other people in the structure, like in your school?
Not especially, except the locked eyes technique. I actually gave them, oddly enough, playing with intent ahead of time. So they were familiar with the techniques in a written sense, and they had also had access to Lizzie Stark's leading American Freeform book, rather. Although how much reading they did separate from my sessions, I'm guessing practically none. But we didn't talk about it. It wasn't really a hard sell. Short version is that although I advertised my research very widely, the people who chose to work with me chose because they in some way knew me and trusted me already. And it may have been different had I gotten teachers less familiar with me. But even when I did this at OAE, I didn't really have a problem with that. Locked eyes was tricky because it was a level of intimacy that not all of them were entirely comfortable with, even though they had grown to know each other very well by that point, if they hadn't already. And at one point, so they were doing a locked eyes workshop, and somebody touched someone else's knee. And that was one of the very few times that we had to X-card it and cut. And it did what it was supposed to. Like, it sounds like a good place to end, right there. And then it was also awkward because most of my participants were women. So another workshop that we did with that, we were talking about how to do locked eyes, and that clearly, if I was going for the affection angle, would have been problematic, especially given difference in power levels. But what we workshopped it as was a scene wherein it was a woman's prison and people were coming, a female visitor was coming to visit. So I played someone's mom who was in the woman's prison having robbed a bank. It got fairly humorous. But yeah, the humor diffused it a little bit, the trust diffused it a little bit, but that was really the only technique I ran into that way.